expert to take me from the real basics and build upon those, I will end up being confused and not having a real understanding of what's going on. So I don't think that's effective. I don't think that's being educated. I think like being educated is being aware of a need, of an intellectual need that you have. So being aware of what you need to learn and knowing where to find that process of learning. Be it a normal institution. I don't really mind like having teachers take me from the real basics up to where I need. But it's like adaptive, kind of having an adaptive institution process. That's kind of what I understand through being educated. I don't know if that makes sense though, because I had a lot of ideas in my mind.
Yeah, totally. Would anybody like to extend or conflict with Mara's point?
So in this context, in the context in which you mentioned, I don't think the person is educated because the person is not in the right context. I think the person should go somewhere else. It's once you find out your need, like what you want to learn, you should find the right environment for you to go through the necessary process. I think you should find an environment which can offer you expert coaching and take you from the real basic until you achieve proficiency. So I still think a certain amount of schooling is necessary, but I think being educated means knowing where to find that institution, that environment, whatever that is. So in that context, in your question, I don't think that person is educated in this context. Yeah, that's fine.
So does school provide education?
It can. It's all about the student, I think.
So yeah, so what do we think that schools can do in order to provide education? Or well, no, let's go back. So do schools educate people in the sense in which we're talking about education? Bradley says yes. How do schools educate people? And so how does going to school meet the definition of education that we're going for?
So attending schools build your knowledge base in a specific area and also they build you, like you said, ground up, right? So yeah, schools absolutely, and you would be educated at schools. But she also did, I don't know, Mara, if I misunderstood you can correct me if I'm wrong, but she said being able to find the platform in which you can grow like whatever your preference is being educated. So she didn't necessarily say school. She said go somewhere where you can get professional training and stuff like that. But if we're using school as like any body of people getting together to learn something, is that the definition of school in this case?
Yes. Well, yes. So let's go for a definition of school like standard public schools, right? Where, so if you think of a standard government paid for school,
yes,
in say America or wherever, let's take that as a standard definition of school.
So either governmentally sponsored or privately sponsored by a corporation, not homeschooling.
Yeah.
Okay. So private schools and public schools. Then I don't know, so I don't necessarily believe schools are 100%, but I agree with her. You have to go to a group or go to an individual. You can work under someone and be educated in that field. But I don't know, being a general contractor, are you educated? I mean, my dad's a general contractor and he can do more trigonometry than I can. So but he never went to college, right? So is he educated or how does that work?
It depends on your definition of education. And if your definition of education is a qualification, then no, not necessarily. But if your definition
he has the general contract, he had to get a certification that said he knew this much. So there is a certification involved still yet.
But so I think a conflict that we might be having here is that certification equals educated. So I have a lot of certifications in a lot of different things, and I am unskilled in those areas, right? So, for example, I have a certification that says that I am an A-grade student in English literature, which means nothing, essentially. Like, it means that I handed in an essay that was bullshitted enough in order for me to be given an A by a teacher who liked me, right? Like, my certification in this does not show my education, right?
Yes, but wouldn't the better question be like, then why don't we're having issues with what education is now at the point, so why aren't we just changing education to be more, like, I guess, open-ended, right? More expansive, to where it's like in your life. How do you do that?
I have theories on how we do that. How do we do that, people? How do we make education less like you attend school for 12 years and then they eject you at the other end and you are educated? How do we make education into something different from that? What do we want it to look like? Jared, if you could design a world that existed with your perfect model of education, what would your world look like?
So the reason why I feel this is a tough question is because my ideal vision of what education should look like is not necessarily what would be most effective for everyone else. And so sort of my ideal vision for what a world would look like would be a number of different options so that students can choose for themselves which method they find most effective, which is in itself difficult because that requires some level of understanding of how one learns before actually being in the environment in which you would be able to figure that out. But I think that having sort of that assortment of options would be valuable. And then in advance of that, the real skill is not what you learn, but learning how to learn, learning how you learn. And so at least for, maybe like K6, although that's an arbitrary, breakdown. So there'd have to be some research on what would be the most effective timeline for this. But in an early period, some sort of experimental phase wherein learners can try to determine for themselves in what ways they find, in what ways they find themselves to be most effective in learning. And then thereafter, a whole smorgasbord of different educational options that learners can choose from and move in and out of as they see fit.
Question, though, I wanted to ask you, Jared. So what about individuals that are lazy, that aren't forced to learn? Will they ever learn anything? Because, like, you're essentially putting the choice in their hand. What do you think?
So here's this is a fun question, because if you think about yourself and maybe the people you're close with, would you personally sit on the couch all day, every day, for the rest of your life? Or is there some other internal drive within you that forces or that causes you to do the things that you do? Are you going to school? Are you learning because you're going to school because someone's telling you. But if that didn't exist, would you just sit around all day and watch television? Or would you prefer that your life have some sort of purpose? So there's...
Could I generate large amounts of revenue from sitting down watching TV?
Probably not. One of the core motivators of humans in general is sort of this idea of seeking, this idea of trying to sort of be something bigger than what you currently are, to go after a goal, to learn and grow and better yourself. And so these sort of intrinsic motivations that are core to how humanity has always operated, I think are significantly better motivators and significantly better incentives than someone telling you that if you don't go to school, then your parents are going to be put in a jail cell, or whatever other repercussions there are with the current system.
So I can add to that. In this question that you're asking, what would people do if they didn't have to go to school? have a situation where it's not a hypothetical and we can look at the reality. And that's for people who unschool. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I probably did. I usually do. Where these kids, from any age that they start, they don't have to go. There's legal ways to do it. They can choose their own curriculum, so they're not even on a homeschool curriculum at all. Nothing. They choose everything. And some of them kind of wash out, so to speak. They don't necessarily go for a career that you would expect, or they find a lot of contentment in kind of a labor type job. A lot of them become artists, probably more than I observe in other populations. It's hard to tell. Some of them go to college and they study for the SAT by themselves. It would be really cool to do a study on the percentages of what people choose to do in that unstructured sense, but it's not ideal because they don't have a lot of the resources that would be helpful for finding a career if that's what they want to do. So if you pair that completely uncompulsory situation with resources, it would be very interesting.
Can you define resources for me? Make sure. That's something I think that's really valuable about schools, is that they have things that would be hard to gather on your own. Specifically, you should have mentors, like we mentioned. Obviously, a body of knowledge, probably in addition to the internet. You should have places to practice, people to practice with, guidelines that you can adopt if you want. I think that's touching on a lot of the things we mentioned. You can probably add some. How do you like judge what the judge the guidelines and how constrictive they are? Like, that's confusing to me.
I think, Jared, you mentioned picking from them. So there could be several recommended ones and a bunch to pick from. What do you think?
Dig it.
So I want to talk about laziness for a second, because that's a lot of people's like major objection. Oh, well, if I didn't have to go to school, I just sit here, or if my 8-year-old, if I didn't like force my 8-year-old to learn something, they would just never learn. My personal feeling is that that's ridiculous, right? So you watched your 2-year-old learn a lot of things without you standing over them telling them to learn. You watched your 5-year-old learn a lot of things, like language. Like learning to speak is the most like human and the craziest, most amazing things that our brain can do. Like understanding and comprehending and creating language is the most amazing thing that a human being can do. It's spectacular. And learning to do that is hard. And we learn to do it because we want to, in order to interact with our environment. So there's a need for it. If I tell my mother that I want something, then she's more likely to get it for me than if I just cry. But there's also a humanness in language that makes it, a strong desire to learn, to speak, and to understand, right? And so, and like babies, they don't just learn to speak, they learn that language exists. Like when you're 6 months old, language doesn't exist for you, right? There is no language. People are making sounds. And so from the age of 6 months to 2.5 years, you go from not knowing that language exists to being a fluent communicator. And nobody taught you anything. Like, these are spectacular things that we do with our brains. And then we grow up, you walk around outside, you pick up bugs, you look at grass, you ask why the sky is blue, and these things are learning. And we do a lot of discounting what early childhood learning is, and actually it's remarkable, and human beings are remarkable at learning, and that's our entire purpose in life, as evolutionarily is learning. And then we take kids aged 5 or 7 or 3 or whatever we do in each country, and we tell them that before they were living, and now we're going to split their time into living time and learning time. And learning happens in this box, in this classroom where we put you, where you sit in this row, and I will teach you these things. And you will learn them in the way that I tell you to learn them, what I tell you to learn, and in an hour the bell will ring and we'll do something else, no matter if you were doing something interesting. And we put learning, sorry, I'm lecturing, we put learning into boxes, and we tell children that outside of this box they are not learning. Like, learning is owned by the school and by the teacher, and it is given to children. Go for it.
Can we separate the idea of being schooled, or like being educated, and being learned? Because they're not the same.
And that's what I was trying to get at by schooled versus educated.
So if our my question is like is our perspective of education, is that solely like, why is that our biggest motivation? Is that kind of...
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
So because we put our perception, like you said, education and learning is completely different in some sense, right? And you can be a learned individual.
Schooling and learning is in my
schooling. Okay, sorry. Then I misread you. I apologize. Keep going.
That's okay. That's okay. So from a psychological perspective, when we separate learning from living, it's those are two things that do not need to be separated and shouldn't be separated. And in my opinion, everybody would be better off if we didn't tell them aged 5 that the things that they do for fun, when they read and play and jump at things and ask why the sky is blue, are not learning. And we tell people that learning is sitting at a desk and writing essays and listening to the teacher, which is not the case. So to speak to the laziness thing, my feeling is that there are no lazy children. There are no lazy children. And what we have is children who have been told that the learning that they have done is not real, and that the learning that they want to do is not real. And so, and then we put them in the classroom box, and they won't learn because, and they'll sit and watch TV because they're told that learning isn't a thing anymore. And they have to pass these exams, they have to get these good credentials in order to become what society would deem as educated. And then that's where laziness comes from. Mara?
I would take that idea even further, and I would say that schools are the lazy version of learning, because it's easy to be, because there's something sheep-like in the whole system. Like, everyone wakes up at 8 a.m., you go to school, you come back at 2 p.m., and it's easy. I realized that when I took a gap year and when I had no schedule, nobody told me what to do, because so even when I work with like other friends of mine and young entrepreneurs who go out of school and they expect to be told what to do at this hour and then what to do and then what to do, they always expect like a recipe to success, which is ideal because in school you know what you have to do, what steps you have to follow in order to get an A. You always have a recipe to success in school, so everything is set, everything is given. But in real life, like, in the case of the young entrepreneurs, they are never told what they have to do. They just have to take the steps. So this is why I believe that educational systems as they are today, as they are set, like all the logistics part and how the system works is like the lazy version of learning, because it's pretty easy to be. I mean, everyone is part of it. It's all like sheep like. That's what I think with regards to laziness.
I agree. I also want to make it super clear, by the way, that I, even if I sound like I'm getting my lecture mode on, you are all more than welcome to tell me that I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm just going to get carried away. But yeah, so do people have more things to add on? Do we need compulsory schooling in order to be educated, in order to have an educated society? And yeah, these questions. Do we need that? Do we not need that? Do we need something different? Let's talk about what would come next. If we decided as a society that compulsory schooling in its current form was not quite as productive as 1890s Britain would like us to believe, then what comes next? So we looked in the readings at democratic schools and at, I'm not sure that I set mandatory readings for other forms of education, but let's talk about democratic schools. What do people think? What were your first reactions to that video?
I kind of opened up with it. Sorry. Like the first thing I said was that it trains us for diplomacy in society. But I also read this an AMA by a person from a democratic school, and I thought it was really interesting. It's one of the ones operating right now, and just everything that they do to allow individuals to shape their own education is just really cool to actually see it in operation.
Totally. Yeah. What else do we like and not like about democratic schools?
One thing that might be good is the outcome of having more voters who are, the people involved. And as it is, we have, one body deciding what everyone should know and how, where we don't really seem to be asking ourselves, who do we want to make? What does our economy need? What kind of society do we want to live in, and with whom? Like those questions we need to be thinking about them, but we don't have the ability to change the outcome depending on what we decide. So if there was any way to do that, including democratic schools, it might be good. Like that's a good question, I think, also as a topic to think about, like who do we want to be?
Who do we want to be as a society? And so I think this is the wider question, right? And that we're doing throughout EdSurge, like what, and it is my opinion that society is formed by the education system that we have, and that everything in society builds off the education that we have. I don't think that's an unreasonable opinion, right? Like society is built off educated people, like people who've been through school. Society is made up of schooled individuals. And so the schools that we have shape our country, our world. So that is the key question that we're addressing, right? Like over all of these sessions is, what do we want the world to look like? And so in order to do that, what do we want our education systems to look like in order to reach that world that we want to look like? So let's take 6 minutes and let's sidetrack into that. What do we want the world to look like in 50 years' time? And how do we educate children who start school, next year? How do we make those systems into systems, given all the resources and time and whatever, how do we make those systems into systems that would give us the kind of world that we want in 50 years? We're going to do that in 6 minutes.
That's what we're talking about?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think I've already explained civic engagement is huge. You have a whole bunch of educated children coming in and being civically engaged. We'd see probably a greater turnover in senators and other representatives, political representatives. We get younger, more innovative individuals in there. You'd see with innovation, Barack Obama, one of the most innovative new liberal presidents that we ever had in my lifetime, conscious lifetime, right? He was elected as one of the youngest presidents of all time, right? Well, that's because typically, if you're an innovator, you're also doing things that all these people that were educated 40 years ago don't even understand. So I think we'd see a stronger government overall. Sorry, Democratic. Short answer, Democratic school.
How else do we want the world to look? And how do we get there? Through education.
I think another thing to consider isn't just what we want the world to look like, but what the world is inevitably going to become, regardless of whether or not it fits with our desires. So, for example, with the rapid increase in machine learning, artificial intelligence, other fun buzzwords that will result in the displacement of millions of, actually potentially billions of workers around the world, there's going to be a class of citizens whose trades and whose training and whose quote-unquote education is no longer going to be sufficient for being a productive, quote-unquote productive, depending on how you define productive member of society, or at least in the economic sense of productivity. And so a major question for education is, what are we doing, or how might we produce citizens who are going to be able to thrive even in that sort of a world? And the current system of factory model, information over understanding, learn how to complete a repetitive set of tasks over and over and over again model is not going to bode well for that world where all of the tasks that that sort of training is built for no longer exist because they're done by technology. And so a big thing for me, at least, with education is how might we help train a new generation of citizens who can still continue to produce value in such a way that they aren't just doing tasks that are going to be replaced.
Education respec, like if you could re-educate yourself, like that's what that thought brought to mind, is like how, like what systems would we in place to if you're like, let's say coal's dying out, let's get them all re-educated in something that they can do that has similar skills. Like how do we do that? Like that seems kind of cool, right?
Mara, go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to make exactly the same point as Jared. And I think the main question is, how do we teach adaptability? That's the main question, because technology will rule the world and education will come right second. It will still be among the top, but I think it comes second, and the priority for education is to see how we can spread adaptability. And it's not like it comes from the outside. It's not like what skills we should teach kids in order to be successful, because we have no idea how the world will look like in a few years. It will be completely different from what we know today, from what we see on the window right now. So it's like all the jobs that exist today won't exist tomorrow. So it's all about how do we teach adaptability so that it comes within the kids. It's not, I don't think it will be such a process that comes from the outside on the inside, as education is now like all the information, the knowledge that comes from the teacher, and I accumulate it, but it will come from the learner. How do I adapt to these exponential trends? How do I make sure that I'm keeping track, that I'm still part of this whole fast and huge advancement, and I'm not left behind? I think that's the question. How do we teach adaptability?
Difficult learning, I guess.
Say that again.
Like making learning difficult, extremely difficult. So you have to be like adaptable.
Okay, that's interesting. How could we do that?
I don't like. I guess that's really. It's hard to do that without just getting too hard onto the traditional academia where you just study to take a test, you know?
I disagree, Bradley. So I think that that's the easiest type of learning, right? To learn something by rote until you can take a test in it and pass. Like that's easy. Like it's difficult because we're doing difficult topics or whatever, but that is the easiest form of learning. So,
but that's memorizing, not learning.
Because it's not really learning. You're actually learning anything.
This is very true.
I guess a way that we could make learning difficult is to say that you can't say that you can do this until you've done it in multiple novel applications. So until you have applied this knowledge in situations where we didn't tell you to apply it, then you don't really understand. That's my feeling. Novel application is my favorite little buzzword there. Novel application of topics. Yeah. I feel like I've talked too much. Just to tell it, I'm just like a guest speaker. I'm just going to tell you my point of view until you all die of boredom. Anyway, so yeah. So Mara, tell us.
Yeah, it's my last question. It's my last point. And given like all these, do you think we need to enhance the education system, or do we need to revolutionize the education system? Okay.
Bradley's going for number 2.
Second option.
I am a personal fan of burn it down and start again. But
we do that with our tax system too.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. I just spent like 15 hours filling in tax forms for Colorado, and I nearly died. It was awful. Anyways, so today, what have we discussed today, Jared? Summarize our class.
We basically ran the gamut of everything from why the current system of education is dooming us for failure to what we should do in light of that, and everything in between.
Yes, we did. We did all the things. Sweet. I had fun with that. I think in the future, I'm going to put this session much closer to the beginning of the curriculum, and we spread it out a little more. We have 2 sessions, because what's the point of school is a little different to democratic education. So yeah, we'll split that out. But, okay, guys. We're reaching. No, go for it, Bradley.
I just had a quick question for Jared. I don't have his email normally, so like I was going to ask him. Did you finish your application to Harvard?
Yes, I did.
Fuck, sorry. I know that was interrupting, but I was like trying to ask him about it. Like,
good luck to you too. Yeah, I have no expectation of getting into most of the schools I applied for, but it doesn't really matter because I don't actually want to go back anyway.
It's the best way to be. A surprise acceptance letter. Do you guys not have each other's emails? Does it not come through on the When I send you emails, can you not see each other's emails?
I think last time I checked it was BCC, but it might not be on the recent one. No, it's on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it now.
Sweet. We're reaching the end of the cohort, guys. We have 4 sessions left. 4 sessions left. This was our final full discussion session. So we have 2 guest speakers, which would be super cool. We have 1 review session, which I'm hoping to structure a little differently, but I'll email you all about that. And our close-off session with all of our goodbye things. So that's pretty crazy. It's gone quickly. I've had fun so far. We're going to send you a whole load of surveys. We're going to make you fill in all these surveys to tell us all the things. You're going to have so much fun doing surveys. It's going to be great. So those of you who have not applied for a leadership position over summer, if you want it, you should apply for it. It's a really cool job. I have really enjoyed it so far. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of it makes you think differently about a lot of different things. You get to talk to a lot of really cool people. We're going to be changing it up a little for the summer. We're going to be integrating a lot of different ideas, and yeah, it's gonna change a little. It's going to be very cool. So if you would like to apply to lead over summer, the form is in the email that I sent on Monday. It's cool. I recommend it. I recommend applying. It'll be a little interview thing. No stress. I don't think we have any more announcements. Do we have any more announcements, Ali? I don't think we do. No, I don't think we do. Oh, we're early. I closed off too early. I apologize. Yeah. I hope you guys have a wonderful spring break, if that exists, or if that was last week. I don't know. Something happened. But yeah. Have a great week, and we will see you next week for our 3rd guest speaker, who is the dude from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So he sounds pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that. If you haven't submitted your article for last cycle, it'd be great to have that today, to be honest. There's a couple people. Ali would also like to rave about being an EdSurge intern. It's cool. It's pretty great. But yeah, have a wonderful week. If nobody has anything else to say. Spectacular. Have a great week and a great time. I hope to see more applications for leadership, and yeah. Oh, and also, and also start thinking about people that you know that you'd like to have apply for being a cohort member in summer. If you have specific people and you want to send me their email addresses, that would be spectacular. If you have guidance counselors, people like this, at universities, at gap year programs, at anything like this, who you think, they're cool organizations for us to get in contact with, send those. Basically, send anything. That'd be great. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next week. Bye.